Welcome to Africa Speaks. I'm Pamela Anchang. On today's show, we will discuss a very sensitive topic. It's a difficult subject matter that affects over 200 million women in Africa and around the world. It is the practice known as female genital mutilation or cutting, known as FGM. Cut between infancy and age 15, most of these women live in shame and silence. I would like to introduce to you a brave woman who narrowly escaped this ordeal and is willing to share her experience here with us today. She is none other than Dr. Nina Smart, a nonviolent human rights activist, sociologist, and author who educates people about female genital mutilation. Wow, so immigrants come here for many reasons now. I understand. It's all embedded in why we're sitting here today.
Yes.
And which you do talk about in your book, Wildflower. Wildflower, the true story of a Romanian girl in Africa. Tell us about this harrowing journey of yours.
I decided to tell my story in Wildflower because, as in the US, we are always faced with the question, where are you from? Simply because we have an accent. So despite the travels and academic achievements, the moment at any conference, anywhere, I may say a few words, I'm promptly interrupted and asked, where are you from? And then I say, Romania. And then everyone kind of looks shocked because Romanian people don't usually look like me. And given that my father was one of the first Africans in my country in the 60s, I understand why they are so shocked. And then they say, well, how can you be Romanian? Then I say, well, my father was from Sierra Leone. And then I went to West Africa, I was in Nigeria. And then, but how did you come to the US? All this, all because I said hello. and then I explained to them that I had to face the fears of being initiated into the secret society of women because it was expected that I, at the age of 19, I should not be shaming our family and my father, who was standing to become a politician. And the ritual of initiation into the secret society of Sierra Leone is what we later found out to be called FGM, female genital mutilation. So that is how I came to the US, and I spent the past 27 years learning about this practice, educating myself, sharing it with everyone, and breaking the silence on this very secretive topic that violates women and girls' human rights.
I want you to tell us about that journey, but first, I'm curious to know, your father was in Romania.
Yes.
And you were going to shame the family if you were not initiated into the secret society. And your dad accepted that, or was he part of that decision?
My father was part of the decision. My father was the person who actually paid for the procedure to happen. One of the misconceptions with the FGM in many of the practicing countries is that it is a women's issue and that men don't know anything about it. Unfortunately, we actually have evidence and statistics showing that in most cases, it is the men, like in my case, my father was the one who paid and organized for this practice to happen because it is really to make sure that it brings honor to the family name. It is the involvement of men is mostly economical, meaning that they are the ones who paid. They actually do not know the details of FGM. So we have been very effective at the international level and in some cases in Sierra Leone by involving men in the process of trying to end this harmful traditional practice.
So my mind is spinning at the thought of a father making this arrangement. Where was your mom?
Well, I have two moms. I have my biological mom, who was in Romania. When I moved originally at the age of 13 from Eastern Europe, from Romania to West Africa, I now had my Sierra Leonean mother, and my mother was right there. From what we know, she had also been initiated into the secret society because she belongs to the Timni tribe. So it is expected, and it was the norm in Sierra Leone and continues to be the norm today, of every girl during teenage or puberty age to be able to join and be honored through the secret society. It is seen as a celebration of ethnicity and embracing womanhood. So it is a very complex topic that I was able to dissect through my research and the many hundreds of interviews I conducted through my master's and doctoral studies. So I will share that.
Absolutely. Where was your biological mom? Was her consent sought
No.
to do this to her daughter?
This is a very secret practice, and even though I was at risk of being caught, I myself had no idea what this initiation was going to entail. There was a lot of fear, there was a lot of silence, and there were many secrets, hence the secret society. I was trying to explain some of the events that were taking place, like the dancing and the celebration and the requests and the meetings between my father and the women that were coming from the secret society asking, because they were speaking in Loco or Limba or Timni dialects that I was unable to understand. I only spoke Romanian and English, and I understood the local Creole, which is like broken English. But no one was going to ask for the consent of my mother. In fact, one of the main attractions that was related to me was the fact that the women were excited to see if indeed Opoto, which is the name given to a white child, which I was called while I was in Sierra Leone, will actually be able to withstand the pain and be brave to be able to overcome all the challenges that most girls have to endure during the process of the initiation. So it was a very confusing time. And when I asked questions from Mommy, who was wonderful to me, and she took care of me for 5 years while I was in West Africa, both Nigeria and Sierra Leone, and of my friends and my cousins and sisters who were already members of the secret society, everyone laughed. There was this whole idea that, oh, okay, you will find out, you will also know once you go through it, if you survive. So even though I didn't really know what this was all about, and I had no idea that this is the process of the initiation ritual, I knew it was something scary. And I was not happy about the secrecy. And I became very curious, and I asked way too many questions. And the fact that nobody answered kind of made me feel even more anxious, which is why I was fortunate enough to develop an escape plan. And this is what I talk about in my book, and how difficult it was to deal with the many issues that are comprising this practice of FGM, from the obvious issue of race, because I was being seen in Sierra Leone as a European or a white child, and I was the only one in our family who didn't have my biological mother there, and to the fact that I should have been in Romania studying medicine, and I was following in my father's footsteps. I was very proud and excited that because of my own merit, the Romanian government, just the way they did for my father at that time, 25 years prior, in the mid-60s, now they had granted a fellowship, a full scholarship for me to study medicine in Romania, and he had promised to allow me to go. And instead of going to university and to continue my education, which of course was meant to then come back to Sierra Leone, where we have so few doctors, and it was so much needed, the decision was made that it's more important for me to respect tradition and for me to first be fixed and to be caught. And I didn't know what they were going to cut, but I knew something was going to be cut. And then maybe I'll be allowed to go to university in Romania. So it was a very big confusion around that time.
I mean, I'm confused myself how your education and your future in serving the community was put aside for this initiation. It sounds to me, the way it was presented to you, like a quinceañera, like
Yes.
the cultures here, or
Yes.
Sweet 16.
Yes.
It's a whole big celebration of
Yes.
something.
Yes.
And wow. So walk us through. I want to know, I want you to tell us a story about how this was orchestrated from the time that you knew that you were going to go through this process to your escape. Give us in a nutshell how this happened.
Well, it was a very exciting time because at that time I actually had a boyfriend in Sierra Leone who was half Russian, and he was my precious prince. And I was happy. Even though I wasn't allowed to go to Romania to medical school, the fact that I was getting along so well with him and with my brothers and sisters in Freetown at the time, it just seemed like, okay, it's another chapter in life. Till we visited my mommy's, so our grandmother's village, Macomb, which is in Timliland in the center of Sierra Leone, and we had to witness all the celebrations and the excitement, as you said, that is very similar to the Sweet 16 or the quinceanera here, and it seemed very exciting. And girls were just going somewhere and they would come back. And I thought, oh, this is wonderful. This is just like camping in Romania. Every summer we go to camp, and then after 2 weeks, you know, you build strong friendships and bonds with your girlfriends, and then you come back. Except that I did notice that a few girls didn't come back. And when I asked what happened to Timmy or some of the other friends that we had, I was told to keep quiet. They silenced me immediately. They said, you don't talk about that, this is it. And then they started in Timni and languages I couldn't understand. So it was all, of course, at that point, I've been in Africa for 6 years. And it was very, I knew the importance of showing respect to elders. And I knew that there are some things that you just don't question. However, I had very good friends. And of course, I had my sister, and I loved mommy, so I asked mommy all the time, and I wasn't getting any answers. And we returned to Freetown, the capital, that is from the countryside, which is Makeni, where this whole episode happened. And I realized that it's to my best interest to find a way to get out. But how do you get out? Although I was 19,
So why did you want to get out? Had you found out about the real deal and what had happened to those girls?
no, but I realized that since nobody wanted to tell us what happened, and it seemed to me that even though their families would not answer questions, they seemed frightened. So this whole secret that was being covered up, and the layers of secrecy, and the fact that I was unable to even understand the dialect, I thought, uh-oh, this is very dangerous and scary, and uh-oh, what am I going to be getting myself into, especially because everyone seemed very excited at the thought of, oh, we're going to have the Opoto come in. And I was very brave. I didn't have a problem. I had learned how to eat very spicy African food, which was a challenge because they said, oh, you know, it's so hot. You know,
Yeah.
Romanian food is very bland. So going from that to the spicy and the hot peppers, but I did it. I was always trying to prove that I am indeed African, and that I love my mommy, and I love my daddy, and I love everything, and I love to dance, and I love to sing, and I love the food. In fact, you know, that's the only thing I was doing. So I just didn't. So I was very tempted, and my book says that in terms of how, oh, it's okay, I can do it. I mean, if they can do it, I can do it. I'm just going to show, because after all, I am tough, and I'm going to show that I am just as strong as any African girl.
And this was going to be your African initiation, I presume.
This was supposed to be initiation into womanhood, that apparently in our understanding was every girl in Sierra Leone had to embrace and go through, so she can go from being a girl to becoming a woman. But I felt I was already a woman. And I was happy and proud, and I wanted to go to university, and I did very well in Nigeria with education, and I was in love, and I felt I was a woman.
So what
So
happened?
I, I was very fortunate when one day an ex-boyfriend from Nigeria sent me a letter, and he professed his love for me. He had been, we lost contact, but he was in Los Angeles, and he thought that I was a very sweet and lovely girl, and he would like to send me a ticket to join him in Los Angeles. So it seemed like, wow, here I am in danger of being taken into the bush, as it's called in Sierra Leone, not knowing what I'm going to face, afraid of the fact that everyone was silent about it. And they were kind of laughing, and so I knew it had to be something very serious, but I didn't know what it was. I really didn't know. I just knew it was something that had to do with cutting. And in Nigeria, many of my friends had marks that had been cut to represent their tribes. But then I thought, oh, well, but Sierra Leoneans don't have any cuts on the face, not on the thigh, so where are they cutting? So of course I was a little bit scared because I didn't know what they were going to cut. So there was this whole confusion about me trying to prove that I am African, and if they're going to cut me, I'm going to be strong. But you know, I'm very afraid, what are they going to cut? So I was going through this roller coaster of I'm going to do it, I'm not going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And I did not know what I was going to do. And there was also another issue. Even though I was 19, my father, he held our passports. I, of course, have traveled, and having come from Romania to Sierra Leone, and in fact, everyone in my family had visited Romania, so we all had passports, and he held them. So how was I going to go and accept a ticket and travel when he was in charge of the passport? I must also say I didn't even think about money, because when your life is in danger and there is so much confusion and there is fear and there is music and there is dancing that you don't seem to understand, and the celebration doesn't feel quite right because it was all wrapped up in secrecy, it felt like
in secrecy and girls not coming back.
And in disappearance of girls that nobody wanted to answer the real questions, it felt like I better go.
Yeah.
Of course, because I was in love with my precious prince, that's what I call him in the book, my half Russian, I was half Romanian, he was half Russian, so we had very similar histories, and his mother was in Sierra Leone. Like most of the Russian mothers are actually in Sierra Leone with their children, unlike my mother, who had never visited West Africa, and she never visited. I was actually kept away from my family because my father really wanted to guide me, and I can use the word force me in becoming African, but I was already African. And I was already embracing, all my friends were African, and I loved being there. But so I had to go tell him, and it took a lot of courage to go to my sweetheart and say, I love you so much, but I'm so afraid of what they are going to do to me. And here, I received this. And he, my ex-boyfriend, is offering to send me a ticket to join him in Los Angeles. And I'm very grateful to him because he said he loves me so much that he would rather see me happy and gone than have to deal with this constant fear. Of course, I was crying on his shoulder because I didn't know what was going on, and I kept asking his mother, and his mother was Russian, so his mother definitely didn't know. His father, however, he was the head of the medical school in Sierra Leone. He was from the Mende tribe. The Mende tribe also practices FGM, and he always encouraged me to stand firmly and not participate, not succumb to this pressure.
And he was Sierra Leonean.
He was Sierra Leonean, and he was a medical doctor. He was the head of the medical school, the only medical school in Sierra Leone. And I was very fortunate because there was someone who was at least interacting with me just a little bit. Of course, we now know the name of this practice. But again, I invite you to think of the confusion and the fear that was felt at that time. And that what I experienced, it is what the girls who have not yet undergone the practice experience. Because nobody comes and sits you nicely and tells you, oh, we are going to do this for you. They do say it's a celebration, and there are clothes, and there is food, and there is, during the healing period, which usually took much longer, like months, 2 to 3 months, but lately it's anywhere between 3 to 4 weeks, of course, because of modernity and the fact that everyone has to return back to their lives. They are taught values about being good wives and good mothers, which must be very valuable. And that is where the real heart of being Sierra Leonean, or any of the groups, that the ethnicities that is being passed on, that is where it is. However, what is being omitted is the fact that before you get to this wonderful interaction between the elderly women and the new initiates, is the fact that the girls have to be caught. And this is something that the girls do not know. This is something that in most cases, even the fathers who are paying for this, the uncles, the cousins, the brothers that know that the girl has to go to the bush or go to Bondo or be initiated, any of those terms, they think, oh, I'm doing something great for my sister, for my niece, for my granddaughter. But they don't really know the details because it has been wrapped in this secrecy.
But I have a question about that, because most of these men are married.
Yes.
And their wives have been initiated. We all know they've seen the wife's business. So they do know.
Well, if you say it that way, then yes. However, the men are, because this is what they are used to, and they do not perhaps have a way to compare that indeed this might not be the natural state of a woman's genitals. And men in Sierra Leone are not eager to discuss this part of the practice because this is very taboo.
Right.
But in most cases, when you are dealing with the social pressure of this subject and the fact that this is very taboo, so it's not like we are sitting around, both men. There's, of course, like in many of the African cultures, there's segregation by gender. So the women sit around and talk, and they really don't like it when the men talk about their women business. So they pay, and they don't ask questions. So actually, they're being very good husbands and excellent fathers because they are uneducated and they do not know the traumatic experience that the girl is about to undergo. And in most cases, the lifelong effects, negative effects, and the harms that's being done.
Okay, so let's go from how you finally figured out how to leave Sierra Leone and how that journey was like. How did you do it? Because that's very brave of you. You had to approach your dad and get your passport.
Oh, that sounds great. It was, as many of us who have grown in very prim and proper households in West Africa, we don't just approach our fathers and
Hi,
get
Dad.
our passports.
Hi, Dad. May I
So
have my
it
passport, please?
it wasn't as easy as that, given that I also had two passports, a Romanian passport and a Sierra Leonean passport. It was a little bit more easy for me to kind of manipulate the situation. So I decided to use my Romanian passport. I was also very fortunate, and some of these details I invite you to find out in my book, on how I had the code for my father's Samsonite. Because of my Romanian background, the fact that my father himself, he used secrecy within the household, because of course he was very fluent and spoke Romanian. So when he didn't want his wife, which was now my new mommy, to understand some of his business, he will speak to me directly in Romanian. You can imagine the kind of challenges I had to face within the household. But I stood firm and I was very loyal. And I kept the secret and always helped my father with the Samsonite. And then 6 years down the road, it came in handy because that is how I got my Romanian passport, which had to then be sent from Sierra Leone to the US.
What's a Samsonite, may I ask?
Samsonite is a briefcase that in those times, in the mid-80s, diplomats in West Africa were carrying their documents, especially my father was the head of the ECOWAS, one of the organizations, regional organizations that dealt with within the West Africa with headquarters in Lagos. And also, in addition to the documents, he had all his secret letters, and he had a lot of money.
So you broke into it?
Well, I actually had the codes. So all I had to do is find the quiet moment. And this is a very exciting part in my book.
I want to hear
on how
it.
I was able to get it and take out, so I don't use the word steal, because after all, it was my passport. And then get it out of the house. That was another adventure, because as many of us know, when you are the daughter of a diplomat in the house, you don't just walk out of the house. There is gates and there is staff and there is a lot of house help. So it was a challenge to keep it secret. So I had to develop a way to help myself, and ironically used secrets to protect myself from the secret society.
Wow. As young as you were. And you finally, the rest is history. You made it out. How did you get a ticket to come
The
to the United
ticket,
States?
I was very fortunate that indeed my former boyfriend was very serious. He really felt that we had a very special
he had
connection.
a ticket for you. He did. Yeah.
And when he had
Yes.
written, he actually worked for the airlines here. So he sent me a ticket on KLM. KLM was the only airline that was flying out of Freetown through Amsterdam. Of course, we have to remember that Sierra Leone had diamonds. Hence, there was a little bit of a international interest for KLM to fly directly into Freetown. And so I got everything together. The adventure was unbelievable, and I got caught. And I thought it was over, but something inside me gave me this strength to continue to carry on. Friday the 13th, which was the day before my ticket was for the following day, the 14th, was very difficult because I had found out that somebody from the airline had reported to my father and breached the contract of confidence, and he did inform him that, do you know that your daughter has a ticket and she is going to be flying to America? And of course, this was unprofessional, given that at that time I was 19. By international standards, I had a right to make decisions and fly without a companion. I had made sure to discuss that with all the KLM representatives, but of course, things sometimes go different in Africa. This was one of the African employees who felt compelled that he must let my father know. My father was a very well-known figure in Sierra Leone. And so I knew that he knew, and that mommy knew. So the three of us knew that the other knew. And so I can laugh now because I made it through.
You made it.
But that Friday the 13th, I had no idea that in the land where I was going to land, which is here, it holds special significance. It was really hard because I had to I had to embrace and go deep in my soul and go for walks by the beautiful Atlantic beach, the back of the house in Sierra Leone, and basically ask the oceans and God and everything that was living, what am I going to do? Do I go or do I stay? I still didn't know if I'm going to, the following day, if I am going to try to attempt. And it was there was no answer. The silence was very loud. And it was then that you know that you do go inside, deep inside of your being, and there is something strong that guides you, what we now call intuition. And it was that gave me the strength to stand tall and take the next step.
Wow. So let's move now and talk about some facts about FGM, because I already have a sense of that journey. But I want to know, at what point after you left did you figure out it's FGM and what it is? And tell us about that.
As many people who manage to escape with a close brush with death, in the heart of fear, and actually the line of fear, in terms of being affected by that terrible experience, the first reaction was to just try to forget about it, get on with life. So having escaped from Sierra Leone, I went to Romania. That is what my ticket was for. So it was Sierra Leone, from Freetown to Bucharest, and just a reunion time with my Romanian family, who had no clue about everything I just told you, and then going from Bucharest to Los Angeles. Romania was no longer communist, so in 1991 September, when I landed, and I tried to, of course, no one knew. My boyfriend from Los Angeles was speaking, of course we speak Romanian in my country, and he managed to explain to my mother, who we live in the northern part of the country. She has to get to Bucharest to receive me. They didn't understand what happened, and they came. But when I got to Bucharest, they were waiting for me, and I was on adrenaline. I hadn't eaten anything for like 2 days. I was only with my jeans and my T-shirt, and I was very shocked, in a state of shock. And I tried to explain why I came with nothing, just with my books and some of my with my diary and some of the pictures I had. I couldn't take anything, because otherwise they would have known I'm running away. Drawn attention, of course. And so that was the closest to my heart. And I tried to explain to them what happened, and nobody believed me. Nobody. We're talking about, I was speaking Romanian. I speak Romanian. They are my family. I explained to them the fear and the confusion and the groups and the disappearing of girls and this cutting and the secret society, and everyone shut me down. Nobody wanted to hear. Because nobody wanted to hear, then I automatically found a way to cope, and eventually I forgot that this whole episode happened.
So that's interesting that you kind of put it at the back of your head or mind that this ever happened to you while in Romania. So when did you finally figure out it was female genital mutilation or cutting? And when you found that out, what was your reaction, that this is what would have happened to me?
I was in Romania for a short time, and then I did not get the visa. I was denied the visa to the US the first time. And through many adventures, and through Russia, then still USSR, I was able to get to the US. And I was here for a few years, during which I went into becoming a fashion designer. It was very difficult to continue on my path as a medical doctor, simply because when I ran away, when I escaped, I didn't have my transcripts, and then the political situation in Sierra Leone during the Civil War was very difficult, and so fashion was another passion of mine, and it just seemed like an easier way to make it in the USA. Mm-hmm. And actually I did make it in the USA. It was great. I became a fashion designer for Barbie, for the one and only Barbie doll. And during that time, I was married to the wonderful person who sent me the ticket. We were happy.
Oh, so it did happen?
Yes, it did.
The poor Russian guy in
yes,
Sierra Leone, you
I
left.
had to cut off all communications, and I had a happy marriage.
Yeah.
And I was a designer, and life was very interesting right here in Los Angeles, during which time I never thought, I just didn't want to connect. It was just denial in terms of what I had escaped and what happened, because it was very difficult. It was a place that was really difficult to reach. So I surrounded myself with beauty, the excitement of a new place, and it was just the way I dealt with it. However, at one point it started surfacing, because our subconscious and our inner self, it's very powerful. So we may want to pretend, but at one point in life, we're going to have to embrace our true calling. And through a series of different events, I stepped boldly from my career as a fashion designer into attending school.
Okay.
And started from scratch, which was really difficult, but fortunately, it was not frowned upon in the American society. And so at the very old age of 27, I decided to, that was about 6 years after I had been in the US, I attended community college, and it was in one of the sociology classes when I learned that the ritual of initiation into the secret society in West Africa was FGM. So for the first time, I had a name, and I was so shocked, and I was so sad, and I started researching, and I wanted to learn more, and I felt so unworthy, because I had the survivor guilt. Because when you learn some of the details of what a woman or a girl has to endure when she is being cut without any anesthetics, and that is seen as an act of bravery, it was a shock. But it was here in Los Angeles where I found out that female genital mutilation is a harmful traditional practice, and exactly all the details that could have happened to me should I not have escaped. So I decided to dedicate many years of my life to understanding, studying the practice from a sociological perspective. And I thought that the best way to deal with this is conduct interviews and go face to face with the women that were eager to have me join their society, because I felt that with an open heart and an open mind, and understanding that this is cultural, and not attacking and not blaming, but truly being receptive to what they have to answer, to tell me, that is the best way to first understand the problem, to see if they want to work with us to create alternatives or solutions, to understand why this continues, to really address the silence, and to combine everything together. And I felt, maybe because of my own story, and if you notice, the people who did help me, including when I got caught, when I was allowed to get on the plane, which actually got me out of Sierra Leone in September 1991, everyone was a man. So I felt that the books I was reading, where it said women issue, it is a secret society for women, everything was women, 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 women. I thought that including men in the conversation was critical. So that is how I decided to throw myself and dedicate my life to studying female genital mutilation, the issue specifically in the country of Sierra Leone.
That is so amazing. What did you learn about the problem with female genital mutilation? First of all, how many types? I understand there's not just one type of female of FGM.
From the World Health Organization and the United Nations, we do know that there are 4 different types of FGM. The first and the second type, they are least invasive, and those are the most common. In Sierra Leone, about 90% of the women undergo the second type of FGM. The third type, which is also commonly known as infibulation, it is the one where about 2/3 of the female genitalia had been removed and the remaining had been sewn together, sometimes using the intestines of goats, for the purpose of pleasuring the future husband. And there is only a very tight and small hole left for the menstruation and another one for urination, for urinating. So it is, from some of the interviews that I have conducted where women felt comfortable enough to speak with me, because it's a challenging topic, it's a taboo in most societies, and it takes a lot of relationship building and trust before someone will want to actually describe the challenges and the horrible experiences, because I haven't come across anyone who has celebrated this part of the initiation. So I was very fortunate to understand that the patterns and some of the reports that are being documented as the problems of FGM that are lifelong, with urination, with childbirth, and that is not including the psychological and the emotional problems that women who have endured and have survived FGM have to deal with in most cases, those who have been willing to be interviewed. It is we clearly saw it as a human rights violation. So this was in the early 2000s. That is when all this research was being conducted. And at that time, FGM was still part of the women issues and women problems. So I was part of the movement at the international level with many of the other activists who work towards making sure that we label FGM as an international human rights violation, because we felt that this is not just a woman issue, but this affects the whole family. And when people understand the violation on the body, they will understand it is the violation of us as humans.
Absolutely.
And it's not just the controlling of women, because
Correct.
there are very different reasons given.
That's why I want to ask you, what did they tell you from your studies? Not just because it's not just in Sierra Leone. Lots of countries, lots of African countries now, understand in Asia as well, practice it. What is the commonality in terms of why this is done? You just mentioned something about doing something to pleasure the man or the husbands, the future husbands. But what is the primary reason why a woman's genitalia is being tampered with?
So the reasons differ depending on the ethnic group.
Okay.
Just the way the practice is very different from Sierra Leone to, let's say, Nigeria, to Sudan, to India, to Australia, to any country in South America where this is being practiced. So the commonality is controlling women's sexuality. Perhaps it's not said so bluntly, but after hours of interviewing, both women and those who are in power and who are the ones who make decisions, whether they're men or women, when it comes to FGM, it is about controlling women's sexuality and making sure that the woman sees herself as subservient and her duty is to please the man. However, within the Sierra Leonean context, because I have had the wonderful opportunity to be trusted and sit like we are sitting and talk to many of the women who had undergone FGM, it is seen as women empowerment.
How is that?
Because the secret society of women is very powerful. Bondo, they are really the heart of the Sierra Leonean culture. In fact, the mask, the Sunday mask, the Bondo mask that is worn by the woman who does the cutting, it is now the cultural symbol of the country of Sierra Leone. That is how powerful they are. So a lot of the SWF, which are the women who do the cutting, some of the activists I have worked with in Sierra Leone, they directly work with the SWF. So when we had the opportunities to speak with them, they said, this is our power. We are not
being
giving it
sexual
up.
beings is power?
Our power is the fact that we can use this practice that makes us very strong. They say African women, but of course we know that this is not common to every African country. And we are strong African women who have rejected the practice and have not been affected by this practice on our bodies. And so it is a conversation that continues. There is a lot of resistance to this in Sierra Leone because it is seen as women empowerment. And any influence from the outside, I am seen as an outsider. Although I am also an insider because I am Sierra Leonean, and because of my work and all the resources that I pour into educating girls and women in Sierra Leone. However, it is conveniently pushed aside when it comes to the issue of FGM. So the conversation continues, and we are in a non-violent way continuing to break the silence and to hold intergenerational talks between women and men and children and young men and other neighboring countries like Senegal that have had successful alternate rituals to stop the practice of FGM but maintain the beautiful part of the Senegalese culture.
Okay.
So we have started this conversation, but we at this point we are still in the process.
In your studies, have you found out if this is a religious practice, cultural practice, and are the governments involved, in supporting this practice?
We have definitely found out that this is not a religious practice. No religion supports the cutting of women's genitals. Specifically, I have always boldly spoken that Islam does not mandate FGM because unfortunately in many practicing areas it is believed that it is the Islamic duty of mothers to have their daughters fixed.
Okay.
And that is not correct. I am a Christian, my family was Christian, and many of my Christian friends in Sierra Leone had to face FGM. It is not a religious practice. However, it is cultural, it's based on ethnicity. It is very powerful. Because of the silence covering the practice, it's difficult to start conversation. But the governments have been asked through different international treaties to sign and ban the practice of FGM. Sierra Leone has a law that protects girls 18 and under, but allows women 18 and over to choose. However, given that this is a secret society, and one of the reasons why I told my story, it's because to highlight the secrecy involved and the fact that how are you going to choose if you don't know what's about to happen to you? And people don't talk about it because only the women who have already been, and within the communities, they know each other, that have been initiated, they are the ones who talk about it. We do have a lot of activists who are much louder and people know, but there is still a lot of confusion and it's not clear. You and I can easily sit here and talk about such sensitive subjects which are tabooed in many areas of Sierra Leone, but this is not the reality for girls on the ground. For many of the women and girls that I have had the privilege of serving through my organization and that I have spoken with, it is still a very clouded topic, so it's not as easy.
I mean, how is it that at 19 or 18 you have a choice when really you don't have a choice? Look at your story. Because psychologically you've been conditioned to believe that this is something that's good for you. I don't think that's much of a choice.
Yes, it's good for us to go into the secret society and be initiated, and the wonderful parts of it is celebrated, and there
Yes.
is food and dancing and clothing. We all love that, and it's exciting, of course, but the ritual itself is not mentioned. And when the girls disappear or they end up in the hospital or there is complications, also that's not being addressed. In Sierra Leone specifically, the women who perform the Karen, the sewers, they are very keen on keeping the practice within their midst in a way that eliminates some of the problems that other countries have, which is the medicalization of FGM, which is it's unfortunately the next step in countries like Egypt or in the United States, where you have doctors who perform this on girls even though they are on the anesthesia and they might not be feeling all the pain, the physical pain that's associated. But we are, all of us activists who stand against FGM, we advocate against the medicalization of FGM.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. That would you, if we took out the pain, is it something that you would still go through? Forget about the pain.
A lot of women choose to go through that because that's the only way for them to be accepted in their society. And of course, unfortunately, it's the way to be able to get married.
What are the consequences if you reject, if you turn it down? As in your case, do you feel like you shamed your family?
I do not feel like I shame my family.
Right.
I feel that I have stood up for myself and I have done great things for the communities back in Sierra Leone. However, I have had the opportunity to meet with my father before he passed away. He visited me in Los Angeles, and even though on 2 occasions, and even though he was, the last time I saw him, he was very ill. Till his death, he maintained that I shamed the family and I'm a disgrace. He did know that I already started my work with local groups in different areas in Freetown and the area where he was from in Lunsar when he was a member of parliament running elections. And also, he did know that I was completing my doctoral studies at the time. Education was very important to him, and yet he did call me a disgrace simply because I refused to embrace tradition as he felt. But I did point to him that, look at, how about my beautiful clothes? How about the fact that I cook only African food? How about the fact that I go to African dances, music, all these amazing other components of tradition that I continued to engage in while here in Los Angeles because I chose, because I truly have embraced my African roots, because that is the beauty of the African culture and not having your genitals cut off.
Well, you know, it's not all of Africa that practices it. It never happened to me. Nobody ever approached me about this thing. I learned about FGM here in the United States, much like you, you know, and not because it was going to happen to me. But I want to talk about some of the consequences of what, let's say, what could go wrong, especially in the primitive setting in the bushes. Tell me about some of the stories you've studied or some of the things you know that could really go wrong, and yet we embrace this.
Painful bleeding, that is the immediate results of the cutting. In fact, some women that we are currently protecting and working with had such terrible stories where they almost bled to death that we actually had to get doctors involved. So the fact that we had medical doctors in Sierra Leone, the people I work with are men, involved, really angered the leaders of the secret society because they felt that we are now bringing men into women's business. But this was just to really save a woman from bleeding. And I live in Los Angeles. For me to get the news that someone is in a small community in Sierra Leone bleeding, that means that the people who made the phone call trusted me to be able to help them. It took many years of working together to be able to get to this level of trust. And what happens is that the doctors risk their life and the life of their family to be able to save a woman from bleeding when she had undergone FGM that was cut too much, that the herbs and some of the other processes that the women used during the initiation didn't work accordingly, and somehow either the woman was rescued by her family or she was able to escape even though she was bleeding. Because the stories are so traumatic, it's really very, very difficult to get the survivors to share that with us.
It's humiliating also.
And it is also humiliating, and many of them are so ashamed because they know that they shame their family, because everything has been so ingrained in us since we are very young that you don't talk about this. So even though I'm trying to help them, it is almost like a fight to get the information so then I can pass it on and figure out from the several doctors I work with around Sierra Leone whom I should contact that could be the best person to serve and be able to take care of her to save her immediately. And in most cases, the women then have to go in hiding. Unfortunately, in many cases that have been reported, and we're not mentioning the ones that perhaps never even got to me. The women disappeared, like the girls disappearing back then when I didn't know what I was running away from. They died.
They probably died.
And they bled to death. I had one case last year where the woman bled to death, not because of the bleeding from the cutting that she endured, which was done wrong, using instruments that were not sharp enough, because there is a lot of rituals that go with that, and there is belief that it's being passed from Sowe to Sowe, and all these special powers that women do have, which it's best for us to listen to and work with them instead of challenging, attacking, or mock them in any way, because we are trying to save the lives of the girls and the women. But this particular woman, she died because she resisted to be redone in the fixing. And the women kicked her so terribly in her stomach. She had internal bleeding. And the doctors I worked with, they really tried to save her. And unfortunately, after about a week, she actually died from internal bleeding. This is a recent story. The woman was in her mid-20s. We actually had several organizations here in the United States, from the State Department as well, who send emergency funds so we can protect not only the woman's family has to go into hiding, the doctor has to be protected and go into hiding, and the doctor's family, because their life is at risk because they are helping. And all this happens while I'm in Los Angeles.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
Dr. Nina, smart. You have done so much studying about this. This bogs my mind. If this is something about empowerment, and women are dying, women are being kicked, and you have doctors who, in the medicalization of it, know the consequences, help me understand how that is possible. How you're a doctor, know the science, know the ramifications, and yet you're doing it. Because now we're in the diaspora, and I understand that girls are taken from here back home for this to be done, or it's even done here.
And you are correct. So we have what is called in the US and in all over Europe, vacation cutting. So that means that here we are approaching the Christmas vacation. So you have girls that will go to visit their grandmothers and the villages and celebration and weddings and Christmas, and it's all great, except that for many of them it's not so great. Like it could have been for me should I not have escaped, because they are being silenced. They are living here. They were born and raised in the US, and they have embraced their African culture as much as their parents have exposed them to the culture and participated in many of our wonderful groups, let's say here in Los Angeles. But being taken, let's say, to Sierra Leone or Kenya or Nigeria or Ethiopia for a vacation, they now face the risk of having to undergo the practice. In the United States and other parts of the Western world, this is illegal. So if someone is being caught, a family, a mother, father, or both parents, are being reported by the daughter or any other family member or anyone who knows for sure that the girl has undergone the practice, meaning that she was taken, she was caught, she returns back to the US, a different person without parts of her body still on her, this is a crime. There is one huge problem though. What we are trying to do at this point here in Los Angeles, one of the reasons why we started our endfgm task force for the greater Los Angeles area, which I'm very proud of,
Which
finally,
you just recently launched.
which we just launched a few days ago, is to raise awareness and to continue to present specifically to the communities that are most affected, because we have the 3 Ps. We want to prevent, protect, and prosecute. But we do not want to go directly to the prosecution. In order to do that, we first need to educate, which is something that I have been engaged in here in the Los Angeles area, throughout the United States, and in different countries in Europe and Asia. For the past 10 years, 15 years since I started my organization, basically having presentations on this is what this FGM means. This is the cultural significance. These are the harmful effects. These are the problems. This is what women endure. We bring stories of girls who have been brave enough to give us the information. So I read their stories. So it brings the face of FGM in the room. And then we offer alternative solutions. We invite all the Africans or the Asians or the South Americans, the people who are from the practicing regions, to learn about it and to stand firmly against the practice, to speak about FGM, to break the silence about FGM. And this is really hard. And I say it's really hard because before my book came out, I was on social media and I had all my friends, and I had so many attacks. These are friends. Most of them have been to school with me in Nigeria. They know me, but there was this whole shame that I am speaking out. I am bashing the African culture. And as you said, this is not every person in Africa does not encounter this. It's about 200 million women and girls at this time around on the planet that have been affected by the practice of FGM. But that does not mean every African woman or every African girl or every girl from India or from the Middle East. It does not mean that, but it just means many of us. And I was affected. I decided to tell the story because I'm asked all the time why a Romanian girl is so passionate about FGM when we have many other issues that I could have embraced, and should I have just been a social worker, there's other things that I could have been involved with. So this is very important to understand that, that it is relevant to our communities. And it is something that we should not be ashamed of. We must talk about it. We don't have to always talk about it, but by calling it a problem, then we have effective ways to deal with it.
Wow. Now tell me about your organization servicing wildflowers, SWF International, and its mission in this whole scope of FGM.
In 2004, as I embarked on my journey for the doctoral studies, I realized that there is a very deep need for attention to be brought to this topic. First, because no one understood what FGM was. So when I told people, oh, this is what I'm working on, it was always a surprise. So I thought in the US, I will be very effective to educate groups like socially conscious groups like Soroptimists and Rotarians and many other groups of like the churches and the mosques, to explain to them what the practice of FGM is about. And then in Sierra Leone, I decided to work directly with activists who are on the ground and empower them to be able to have the tools and the resources they need in an atmosphere that I have no idea how challenging it can be. Because it's a different reality for me to be here in Los Angeles and speak to audiences and educate them. And it's very different when you are faced with knives and a group of women who are about to kill you because you pronounce the name FGM and you are exposing, as they feel, their traditions. So it was a bold step, and it's been an interesting journey, and I'm very happy for the partnerships that I have formed along the way. And recently, the most amazing partnership is with the endfgm task force in here in the greater Los Angeles area. I've also participated at the national level for the End Violence Against Women Summit, which was the first summit in the US held specifically dealing with the issue of FGM right here in the US. We're trying to take the lessons from countries like Sierra Leone, where this is such a complex issue, so we don't make the same mistakes as we are developing a strategy of making sure that this is addressed, silence is broken, and FGM does not go on the ground here in the US.
Do you think FGM, the practice of FGM, prioritizes the man's sexuality over the women? Because why are men not being cut? Why are women being suppressed? Their desires, I guess.
It's a very complex answer, but the short version is yes, because the reason that is being done is to suppress women's sexuality and to make sure that the woman is ready, they say, the marriageability of women, which is why we have taken approaches with young men to pledge that they will marry a woman who has not undergone FGM, and there will be no shame attached to it. We have found, many of the activists who work together, that when we do educate men and we let them know what this practice is all about, they are so horrified that the fathers decide that they will never want their daughters to undergo FGM. And the young men pledge that they will make sure that their future wife will not have to undergo FGM. We also highlight the benefits of women who fully enjoy and embrace their sexuality and live a sensual life.
It's really hard for me to digest the fact that this is not something that was driven from the male perspective, because I don't understand how women can just get up and say, oh, we don't want to feel anything, we just want to be there for our husbands. You know, it's really hard for me to conceive that, because I think the men have the power.
And in most societies, the men do have the power. In the case of Sierra Leone, where I have studied, and I would say that I'm an expert on FGM, is the women have been brainwashed. They have accepted, and this twisted idea of women empowerment and the fact that they associate the practice with the highest level of power, equal with political power, because they are the ones who campaign the way they were going to campaign for my father, who eventually did become an MP, and he was running together with the leading president. He passed away before that happened. But they really are very excited, and in a deeper way of examining it, it is the men in power who manipulate the lack of education of the women who believe that this is their identity and this is their tradition and they must protect it at every cost. This is the way to show the men that they are powerful, and the men just go along with it and benefit nicely. So what you're saying, in the case of Sierra Leone, it is very true. It is just not as black and white as you are presenting it.
We're going to have to do this another episode of FGM and really educating more, because it has so many layers. But let's wrap this up with, how do we protect our girls? How can we protect girls from here, from, you know, girls who are born here, from being initiated into the secret society? And also the girls that are back home, how can we, the women in the diaspora, you know, get to the bottom of it so we can start to stop this practice?
Thank you. And I usually don't talk about the S's of FGM. So my favorite S is, it's secret, silence, and solutions. So solution, of course, is my favorite S, because the most effective and the one that we must all engage in is education. Because educating the girls, educating the women who are using the knife to cut, educating the mothers, educating the fathers, the community, traditional leaders, religious leaders, politicians, everybody, breaking the silence on FGM is the first and most effective step, and it has proven to work in many societies and in many groups like in Senegal and in other areas, even in Sierra Leone, when we have groups of SWFs, which are the women who do the cutting, who abandon the knife. It's their education that brings them to the realization of they can actually have a different way to earn a living, to maintain their high status in society, but at the same time not continue to hurt the girls. And instead of parents in Sierra Leone spending so much money for the girls to be initiated, instead of putting the girls through education, they can use that money to buy uniforms and to buy shoes and books, because the education is a human right, so education is free now. But there are many other aspects of education in West Africa, as we know, and food and medical supplies and everything else that is needed. So we can use that money in a much better way. They say the cost of initiation equals about the 2 years cost of a girl's education. So I always say education, not mutilation.
And that's true. Education, not mutilation.
And that is also very valid for our girls who are born and raised here, because I am hoping that by sharing my story and saying how I used my Romanian citizenship to escape FGM in Sierra Leone, the girls must also know, because they have the American citizenship or the UK citizenship, if it comes to the fact that the parents are under so much pressure that they cannot withstand and say no to the group, to their parents, to their uncles. We all know the beauty of the African culture, but we also know that sometimes it comes with a lot of pressure. The girls have the right. They can say, I am an American. I am going to go to the US Embassy. I am going to get on that plane. So they have to have the courage to stand. The mother can have the courage to tell her own mother that, look, yes, you did it on me. And I love you, mother, anyway, because I know you did it because you love me. However, I'm not going to do it on my daughter, because we can. And in fact, if I do it on my daughter, I'm going to have to go to jail when I get back to the US. So sometimes just using that ultimatum, this is what's going to work.
Yeah.
So this is what we can do, apart from us continuing to talk about it and have an organic shift into making sure that we reject the practice of FGM. And also, I would like to end on the fact that we can all continue to celebrate the beauty of our Africanness. And I'm always proud to wear my beautiful clothes, and to also share the amazing taste of good cassava leaves. Because I buy the cassava leaves from African store.
Correct.
That is owned by a Nigerian, and cassava leaf is from Cameroon.
That's true.
And I make the Sierra Leonean version of the cassava leaves. So how much more shall we embrace here in the diaspora than share good food, good laughter, the beauty of our African culture, and standing firm against anything that harms our girls?
I think it would be also fair to ask women who have been cut or who escaped like you, who are in the diaspora, who know the perils of this practice, to educate back home, to educate your sisters, to educate your dads, to educate your families, to educate your communities about this practice, and tell them to stop. We're going to have to work with pediatricians as well, and gynecologists.
Gynecologists.
Okay, we all go
and
for a
birthing
physical.
centers, the birthing centers in Sierra Leone.
Yes.
And many other venues that are presented from the international projects that address the mother and mortal
Yes.
mortality. The
Yes.
child
We need to
mortality.
engage everybody, the doctors here who consult with the girls and the parents, to pay attention to this and to educate. On that note, I want to thank you so much for your courage and your bravery coming here today. I know it wasn't easy, but we did it.
Thank
and
you.
together we're going to make a difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And see you next time on Africa Speaks. I'm Pamela Anchang.